please. Okay, welcome to this press conference. My name is Hans Ellegren. I'm Secretary General of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. And welcome all our laureates, this year's Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and economical sciences. Closest to me here, you will find this year's laureates in physics. It's Professor Alain from France, John Clauser, US, and Anton Zeilinger from Austria. Next, we have the chemistry laureates, Professor Bertozzi, Professor Meldal, and Professor Sharpless. And next to Sharpless, you will find this year's laureates in the prize in economical sciences. We have Dr. Bernanke, Professor Diamond, and Professor Dybvig. At this press conference, you are welcome to ask questions to one or several of our laureates. Please keep the question in English. You may ask them about their scientific achievements, their views on research, on the particular research or research in general. And that means that we will have the questions to focus on the scientific achievements for the prizes. Afterwards, there will be time for individual interviews, and for some of you, I think it has been scheduled for many of you, but information about how this takes place will come from our press attachés, and we have our press secretary here as well who can help you to get a hold of a laureate to talk to. When you ask questions, please use the microphone. You will turn one of the buttons on, and then a green light will start to flash. And then you can ask questions. And then start by, please, introducing yourself when you ask questions. And by that, I open the floor for questions. So who would like to start? Yes, please.
Hello, good morning. I'm Carmen Rodriguez from the Spanish news agency EFE. I want to ask to Mr. Bertozzi, Ms. Bertozzi, maybe the question is very simple, but how do you feel being the only women in this table? Maybe Nobel Prize has to do more for women?
I have to turn the microphone on. Oh, it's on, okay. Thank you for the question. It's a tremendous honor for me to sit here among these incredible scientists. And I'm glad that there is one woman among us. As it happens, there are 5 female chemistry Nobel laureates who are living, and 4 of the 5 are here in Stockholm this week. And the 4 of us were awarded Nobel Prizes just within the last 3 years. So I think that's a very positive trend, and deeply honored to be among the 4 that are here and among the 5 that are alive today.
Yeah, please.
Christian Müller from the Austrian press agency APA. I have a question to the physics laureates. The Nobel Prize Committee recognizes your developments with which you have laid the foundation for a new era of quantum technology. Knowing that predictions are difficult, especially when they concern the future, what is your prognosis for quantum technologies based on entanglement?
Who answers?
Shall we begin with our Austrian representative here, Professor Zeilinger?
But not in German.
In Chinese?
Yes.
Well, I should say that the beginning, this is one of the big surprises of my life. When we, and I think I include all of us, when we started these experiments in the 1970s, when actually people from the press who didn't have you asked me what is this good for, I told them, I can tell you, proudly, this is good for nothing. We do it for intellectual curiosity. And so some of the ideas which we had in my group, like multi-particle entanglement, which was an idea which was born in the 80s. That's helpful, yeah, helpful. The multi-particle entanglement, which was invented in the 80s, was my plan to do it right away. And at that time, the tools did not exist. We had to develop better entanglement sources. We had to develop fast ways to switch and all these kind of things. And it took me 10 years until it finally succeeded. And many of the other experiments, they were just along the road, so to speak, like, and so, etc. Why do I tell you this? It's about the unpredictability of future. We did not know how to do it, and we did not know what to use and all this. And it comes in time. Now, the big surprise now is that there are applications. There are already applications. Like most of the broadest applications is quantum random number generators. There are companies which sell that. Quantum cryptography is very well developed, and it's kind of on the verge of being really used in the outside world. Quantum computation has some interesting new angles, particularly in quantum simulation and so on. How it would look like in 20 years, I have no idea. Because if you would have asked me 20 years ago, I would also have had no idea about what happens now. I mean, just think about simple things. Think about your mobile phone or whatever you use. This is really, really difficult to predict. But what you can predict, and this has happened often in the history of mankind, when a sufficient number of sufficiently clever people work together, something often comes out. Having said this, it is very important now not to oversee that there is a future beyond the present future, namely you need to develop new fundamental experiments and new ideas to open up possibilities for applications at a later time. Or, even more radical, I think, in quantum mechanics, John Clauser, in a nice interview in Washington recently, you ended your talk by saying, I still don't have an idea what's going on. I still don't know what's going on. Here is the key. Here is the key for a conceptual change of our role in the world. And I would say we have been thinking about that, we, humanity, for 100 years. So the solution must be in a direction where nobody has thought about yet. So probably, if that happens, it will be a big, big change.
Professor Asper, do you want to add something here?
Yes, I share all these comments by Anton, but I would like to, regarding applications, I would like to make a personal comment. I think there are personalities who are not good for finding applications, and I am one of them. But I think that the right process is the following. I give talks, many talks, where I try to explain as clearly as I can what we have done, which is not simple. And I hope that in the audience, there will be some mind oriented towards applications who will say, we could use that for this. I think it's a process that works. In my country, in France, we have several startups in quantum technologies, and many of them have been done by my former students. So in a sense, I'm not finding application myself, but I think I am contributing to it.
Great answer. More questions? Yes, please.
Good morning, I'm Corina Negra from Radio Romania Science Department, and I have, if it's possible, 2 questions. The first one is for Professor Barry Sharpless. So, how did the first Nobel Prize change your life, professional life? And how do you expect the... Sorry, and how do you... Sorry? What is the question? The question is the same, the following. So, the first prize, Nobel Prize, how did it change your life? And how do you expect the second one to change your life? And then I would have a...
Maybe we can take those first then.
Sorry.
Okay, well, hardly at all, because I just don't pay much attention to things like that. When I went to be an assistant professor at MIT, I just started doing research and dive in completely, and other people would worry about tenure. I never thought about tenure. I just do what I had to do. What I'm doing, I did it. I kept going in science the same way, trying to change it to more useful. But I'm just not connected too much to that part of the world. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be famous, and I really love this part of the world. I'm from half Norwegian, Swedish family, but you know, I'm sorry, I'm not a very representative case. I get a little shy about being on, out in public that way, and I'm really good at memory. I have a photographic memory, so in chemistry it's an advantage, or I had one, and. And my colleagues here, similar, Morten and Carolyn, they both like to do useful things. And I think chemists are hoping we can be recognized for doing useful things. And we are the ones who make the bonds, and the bonds are what make the products, be they plastics or medicines or lubricants or hydrogels, anything that we can make that's useful. I don't think we did enough of that, and that's why, we didn't do that intentionally. We were fishing around for things, we found random things, but if we find something really special that's really guaranteed, we can't use our hands to make bonds. We have to have a perfect reaction, and nature does that automatically for us every day, but we can't. We work from the bottom up, and so if we don't have a great way to connect something, and Morten and I found the same reaction within a few months of each other, and we just couldn't believe it. I'm sure he had the same. They had the same experience. Carolyn and I talked a lot about click chemistry and bioorthogonality. So we all shared this. I'm glad we're together because we shared this same curiosity about how to get something useful. And the way you get useful as a chemist is to make bonds. Not to make Velcro, like holding hands in with somebody, but click, something on you clicks, and you're together for life. You're married. So that's the idea of how we chemists can serve mankind. And it could be in energy, it could be in any particular thing. And of course, physics is the king and tells us what we can do in this universe. But what I got out of being a chemist is I got a real privilege, and a lot of people love to do this. My students love it. And so I feel very privileged, and I just keep doing chemistry. Unfortunately, my wife would like to retire and like me to retire, but I can't do it.
Maybe we can save the second question so we spread the word a bit. We can come back to you, because there was one hand here. Yeah, please, Morten.
Use it like it is. So the young students always ask you, how can you get a Nobel Prize? And I used to say, if you want a Nobel Prize, you're never going to get it. Because what drives research, and I'm sure that's the case for Barry, is the curiosity for what you can find. And to actually work with your mind all the time, even when you are not in the laboratory on a particular problem that you have observed, usually in the laboratory. So that's what drives real research. It's not the ambition to get a Nobel Prize in the end.
Yeah, please.
Hello, Joachim Goxer at TT News Agency from Sweden. I wonder if I could ask the economics laureates here about you all helped develop like a toolbox to handle financial crisis with your research, and I wonder when you look at the world today with inflation shock and everything we have, is the toolbox good enough? Do we need more research? Where is it lacking? Could you help us calm us down, maybe?
Okay. Do we need more research, you said?
No, we're talking economics now.
Oh, economics. Sorry.
Dr. Bernanke, do you want to start?
Well, I think my contribution over the years has been to show that what happens to the financial system has tremendous consequences for the economy as a whole. So my original work was on the crisis of the Depression and how it affected employment and output in the 1930s. And then, of course, I had a very close-up look to the 2008 crisis, in which I expected would have a very severe effect on the U.S. and global economies at that time, which, in fact, it did. So I think the key lesson, first of all, is that it's very important not to let financial crises spiral out of control and have tremendously adverse effects on the real economy. In terms of lessons, though, I think that the question is, once we have understood that it's important to prevent and to control financial crises, what are the tools that you have for that? And I think there are tools that you can put in place before the crisis happens, and then there are tools that you have to have during the crisis if it does happen. And before the crisis happens, you need to have a strong regulatory system that makes sure that the system is resilient, that it has enough ability to withstand shocks that may hit it. There, I think we have made a lot of progress. We had a reform of financial regulation in 2010 in the United States after the crisis, which strengthened the banking system, for example. But I think there's a lot more to be done there, in particular in the United States and in some parts of Europe. So-called shadow banks. Those are lending institutions which are not commercial, officially chartered banks, and which do not have the same requirements, regulation as banks, were actually a big source of the crisis, but they have not been as nearly as regulated or overseen as the regular commercial banking system. I think that's still a weakness of the United States, and my sense is from that, even though the shadow banking system is smaller in Europe, that it's also a problem in Europe. So I think in our complex, interconnected global system, where so much credit, over half the credit in the United States, is not through banks, it's through other kinds of institutions, that it's really important to have a strong regulatory oversight and one that looks at the whole system, not just at individual institutions, but at the whole system. And then the second set of tools, which I've written about with colleagues, is what do you do when your defenses fail and the crisis happens? And I think that we have made progress there as well. We've introduced tools for shutting down a failing financial company with reducing the damage that it does to the rest of the system. But again, I think those tools are untested. I think some of the powers of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury were taken away after the financial crisis. So I think that's still also an area where more work is needed. Why can't the president, for example, announce a financial emergency that would introduce certain temporary authorities, for example, to prevent the crisis from getting out of control? So I think we learned to our regret that the stability of the financial system is extremely important for the broad economy, that the electrician in Minneapolis is just as much affected as the broker in Wall Street when the financial crisis collapses. And we've made a lot of progress, but I think there's still a good bit more to be done to make sure we have the tools to prevent and control crises.
Professor Diamond, do you want to add something here?
So Bill Dybvig and I, in the early 1980s, were thinking about why the financial system chooses to set itself up in a way, write a set of contracts that leave it subject to these financial crises and bank runs and panics and things like that. So that turned out to be, when we were doing that, we weren't thinking of huge policy implications. We were just thinking about why does the financial system do that? And it turns out that because it has more to do with the contracts that they write in the financial system rather than the type of institution, a commercial bank, say, versus a shadow bank, like Ben just mentioned, sort of the inside of our work is that you basically have to look for excessive amounts of short-term debt and mismatch of liquidity of assets and liabilities. And that could be anywhere in the financial system. It could be a stable coin. It could be, it could be an insurance company. It doesn't have to be a bank. And you asked about, toolkits. There are some toolkits that, take the fundamental understanding of where these different types of crises come from. Is there, low lending standards, or have we gotten to the point where there's a panic and people are fearing fear itself? I think there's, a toolkit is a little more than exactly what we have. We have methods for thinking about how different stages of financial crises evolve, dealing with them if you get to the later stages you hope not to get to, and as Ben mentioned, thinking more about good ways of doing regulation and supervision in advance to keep, excessive buildup of the types of risks. In addition to things like resolving banks in a more efficient way than just letting them, be run or be, closed down in a sudden way, there's this thing that regulators and supervisors around the world call stress tests, which are thinking very much about the economy-wide risk exposures on well-diversified institutions. So I think there's been lots and lots of progress. I think we maybe understand a bit more than we did, 40 years ago. But it's certainly not the case that we are or anytime soon going to be a point where crises are not going to be an issue.
Professor Dybvig, could a society do with banks altogether?
No, society can't do without banks altogether at this point. So part of the question is, what is a bank? And this is an area where the regulators are often behind the curve, because something new that looks different but it's still a bank comes up. Example is the crypto banks. There was I think it was Celsius, the promoter had a T-shirt that says "Banks are not your friend," and Celsius was a crypto bank, and Celsius proved that in fact that bank at least is not your friend. So I think that a lot of times entrepreneurs can be a couple of steps ahead of the regulators because they can go around the regulation. There's a technical definition of what a bank is. They can go around that. And so that's something that I think keeps repeating itself. That's an ongoing issue, is what are the things. In terms of the original question, I think it would be naive to think we have a complete understanding now and we can't get to a point where we have a much better understanding of even the basic issues. So I think, fundamental research should go on, and I think that, as Doug said, at least in my case, when we were working on our research, I was just curious. I mean, I heard curiosity before, and I think that's being curious about how things work and about how things fit together is the wellspring for a lot of these things. And if you have people who are looking at these institutions and these economic questions, who are curious about how things are working and how they should work, that will lead over time to things that are really useful. I mean, I actually did not expect regulators would know about it. I remember the first time I was at a conference in the 80s, I met somebody from the FDIC, and I asked him, I said, I see you're at the FDIC, what do you do? And he says, I close down banks. And I said, oh, that's cool. When you think about banking, how do you think about banking? And he mentioned Dybvig, and I think he knew who I was, but the fact that he knew about the paper and that was something that was influential in his thinking was really gratifying, and something I didn't expect. My dad told me I would never do anything practical, so that was a good thing to hear.
Oh. Let me just return to chemistry for a while. Professor Bertozzi, I think you have said that the field of bioorthogonal chemistry is only in the beginning. I'm curious to hear what kind of future do you see in this field?
Thank you. Well, bioorthogonal chemistry was invented originally as a tool to probe biological molecules in living systems. Oh. And, here we are 25-ish years later, and it's now become a platform for therapeutics. And I think that reflects a new chapter in the chemistry in which it will be used to develop new kinds of medicines and to target medicines to the tissues where you want them and keep them away from the tissues where you don't. So I think in the near term, that is going to be a pretty rich area that will grow over the next decade or so.
Could that be cancer therapy, for instance, or?
Yes, the first application that has reached human clinical trials is for cancer therapy, for soft tissue sarcoma in particular.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have one more question?
Yes, one of the questions would have been this one. If all the chemistry laureates could be so kind to explain in very, very plain words, for the listeners who are not specialists at all in chemistry, what click chemistry means and what bioorthogonal chemistry means. Does this mean that we can give up catalysts which are, I don't know, byproducts, which are forming byproducts or other reactions? Can we think about these methods as a method of, again, non-products, environmentally friendly, or how?
Morten, maybe?
You want to take click chemistry?
I didn't quite understand again. I'm sorry.
I can do it.
I don't hear well. What was the question again?
The Professor Meldal, do you want to answer this?
I can answer this question. So, well, all chemistry is interconnected. So we are all building on experiences from before when we do these kind of inventions. And click chemistry builds on a period of searching for these kind of reactions, actually. Because we had something called combinatorial chemistry in the 90s, The click chemistry was sort of something that really everybody was looking for, not in the terms of click chemistry. It wasn't called click chemistry because that came out of the white paper that Barry Sharpless group wrote on this. What is click chemistry and how do we get to it? But eventually, we found the reactions, the 3 reactions that are now used as click reactions in the small toolbox that is orthogonal to the other reactions that we are using in chemistry. And click chemistry makes it possible for us to do molecules and architectures that we have never been able to do before. So we are able to interconnect completely unprotected biomolecules with each other using click chemistry. And you have just heard about the click chemistry in cells. So these are things that was not possible before. And that is what makes click chemistry quite different from what was there. And
now it's possible because of?
Because we can use these click reactions as a kind of molecular Lego that just add these functionalities. So you have one functionality on the right and one on the left. And you can click these together with a new kind of reaction that doesn't affect everything else. It's green, it's occurring in water, and you can carry it out at very, very low concentrations, which is quite unique for chemistry. Usually, if you have 2 components that react, they have to have a certain concentration before they will actually do that by themselves.
Barry,
I say that when I looked at the things that he chose to connect, his life had been played out with larger life molecules, but pretty big for small molecules. And so he was, I'm sure, pleased and happy to just run along with that because he could connect these really big molecules together. And in my case, I've evolved in this understanding of the, well, you know, the famous person who was a character up in Canada, it was the medium is the message, Marshall McLuhan, like television. It's not what television shows. The television is the message. And you know, we've grown up with it. But in chemistry, the bond that you make, especially intermolecular, if you're 2 things bouncing around in this room and you're separate, you don't have any statement to make together. You're not uniquely able to address a niche that would make something happen in equilibrium that would maybe help your blood sugar get taken out in the kidneys better. That kind of little signal is going to come from a connection. And so it's the connection that matters. It's not, life has 35 building blocks, but she has top-down control. She connects this whole thing through. It's self-referential. It happened in evolution. It's a miracle. We don't have any control at all like that. We can control from the bottom up by making molecules that wouldn't otherwise know each other, know nobody else. They have no choice. I mean, I remember the patent examiner in Washington for this QAC patent, a young woman, she said, no, you can't have a patent like this. I said, well, the R group has this thing on it, the blue guy, and the other side has the pink, and they were male and female, but that was a problem. So it may be a problem today, but it was just the male and female parts. And I said, well, she said, you can't just have anything on either group. I said, well, you see the Washington Monument out there? If there was an azide out there, and I wanted to get that azide, I would just spray it with a bunch of acetylenes and copper, and I would get that azide. That azide couldn't survive. It sounds like war, but you know, it's a bit like unbelievable, your needle in the haystack stuff. And that gives us control, which we don't have. We're big, blunt objects trying to control molecules, which are like a grain of sand. My hand is like Jupiter. I'm trying to move a molecule. Please don't tell me anybody believes we can do that. It doesn't happen that way.
Thank you, Barry. I'm afraid that we have to stop there. Time is running out. I thank all of you very much for attending this press conference. I hope that you will come and listen to the lectures given by the Nobel laureates tomorrow at Stockholm University. So again, thank you, the laureates, for your participation here, and thank you, all of you.